Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into KMRD Radio Stuff. My name is Mike. I want to share with you an email that I would usually include in my Monday mailbag video. But this required a little more thought, and I honestly don't have the answer. So I reached out to my friend Vance, N3VEM. He's part of the POTA administration, and asked him if he could make a video answering this question. So let me show you what the viewer wrote. He's asking, when hunting POTA on several occasions, the activator says they're working two separate parks. This raises two questions. How does someone activate two parks at one time? And how should I log it in QRZ.com and Logbook of the World? Currently, I make one entry using the park number they have listed on the POTA spots page and just put the second park number in the comments section. Should I be making a separate entry for each park number or stick to only one entry? Now, this may pain you or surprise you to hear. I've never done a twofer, so I don't really honestly know what constitutes all of that. I kind of have an idea, but let's listen to the pros here. So go ahead and take it away, Vance.
Hello, Mike, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to answer Derek's question. Derek, for your benefit and for all of the viewers, for all of Mike's viewers who don't know who I am, I'm Vance Martin, November 3, Victor Echo Mike, one of the volunteer developers for Parks on the Air. I've been with the program since its inception, all the way back in 2016, 2017, right as we were ramping up the program after National Parks on the Air ended. So I have a lot of experience in the organization and know a lot of the ins and outs. And my current function with Parks on the Air is actually acting as the lead for the support desk. So what I do right now with POTA is answer questions. So this is right up my alley. So thanks for the opportunity to do this, Mike, and answer a couple questions. So the questions that I'm answering came from, like we said, came from Derek. And he had noted that when he's hunting parks, he sometimes see people mention that they're in two parks at the same time. So he really wanted to know what was up with this. So he had a two-part question. His first question was, how does someone activate two parks at one time? And of his two questions, this is actually the easier one. So I'm glad to answer this question first. So I'll use some parks right near me as an example in Pennsylvania. So if you look at the rules for POTA, basically what it says is you have to be, within the boundary of the park, or the exception being like for trails, you just have to be within 100 feet of the trail. And really the reason we have that rule is so that you don't have to set up like right in the middle of the trail and block the path for hikers. You can go off to the side of the trail a little bit, set up to your activation. So essentially you have to be in the park, or if it's a trail, alongside the trail. So an example of where you can activate two parks at the same time near where I live is if we look here at the state game lands. So this first park, I pulled this map up, but this is actually the map for this park, K8779. So if you look at this park, this is what I would call a non-contiguous park, which doesn't really matter for this example, but it just happens to be a park where it's one park, but it has kind of three distinct chunks of ground that are considered one entity by the state that manages these. So that's that park. The other park that's in question, if we look really close, we see the Appalachian Trail here. So in this case, the Appalachian Trail actually runs right through the middle of this section, comes up into the section of this one a little bit, and then actually comes into this third section before wandering off. So the way you can activate two parks at one time is when there happens to be parks that overlap. And trails are a great example of this, where a trail, so in our case the Appalachian Trail, which is K-4556, happens to run through K-8779. So in this case, if I set up anywhere along the Appalachian Trail inside of this park, I'm in two parks at one time. And sometimes you actually find 3 parks that overlap, 4 parks, or I think the most that we know of in any one spot is there's a couple places in the country where there are actually 5 parks that overlap, because there's a couple different parks that cross boundaries, and then there's 2 different trail systems that cross each other right at the same spot. So there's a couple places where you can get up to even 5 parks at one time, but 2 is the most common, and that's how it's done. The second part of the question that Derek asked is really the more complicated one, or it can be very complicated. So I'm going to stick to answering the question from the perspective that Derek wrote the question. So what he directly said was, how should I log it in QRZ.com and Logbook of the World? He says, currently I make one entry using the park number that he sees on the spots page or that they say over the air, and he just puts the second park number in the comments. And he's asking, should I be making a separate entry for each park number, or should I stick to only one? So for context, Derek is asking this question from the perspective of a hunter. So just like I'm set up here, I'm just sitting in my home shack, making contacts with people in parks. If you're hunting and it's a park-to-park situation, it gets very convoluted very fast. But at its most basic level, we're going to use the example that I'm a hunter sitting at home and I'm contacting somebody who's out in the park. So we'll pop back up to our other screen here, and we'll talk about how that works a little bit. So in the example that I'm giving, the way I'm going to answer this, how should I log it from a hunter's perspective, I'm actually going to start by explaining how the activator would log it. So we're pretending that Mike, K8, MRD, took a trip to Pennsylvania, went up to these two parks we talked about. So in his log, when he contacts me as the hunter, I'm sitting, right here in my shack where you see he's out in the park. He would log just like this. He puts his station and operator, date, time. It looks almost like duplicate contacts. The only thing that makes it different is that he has two different park numbers, and this is the bit of data that makes these two things unique. So Mike, as the activator, is putting two entries in his log, one for each park, and that's essentially unique to parks on the air. As the hunter, from my perspective, sitting at home, I've really only had one exchange over the air, and to say how, to decide how I should log this, unfortunately the answer is, like everything else in ham radio, it depends. And I would take the question back to, why are you logging in your home station? And when I say why are you logging, I don't mean like, why are you doing that? I mean, what's your motivation for logging? The FCC doesn't actually require us to keep logs anymore, but I would say probably 95% of us do, if I had to guess. So when I'm at home, I'm really going to probably fall into one of two buckets. I'm either logging just because I like having the records and I'm a detail-oriented person, and I log for all of the reasons that the FCC used to require us. Or the second bucket is I'm logging because I'm, into awards programs, so I like to get the certificates and the contacts and the worked all states and all of that award stuff that you can get via Logbook of the World, QRZ, EQSL, they all have their programs. So the answer to the question, how should I log it if I'm just sitting at home, really depends on your motivation. If you're just a detailed record keeping person, you can just stick to doing one log entry like you have been, and that would essentially cover it, because it's just for your personal log in that situation. And that's actually how I do my own personal logs. So in my own personal logs at home, when I'm contacting someone who's in a park, I actually put it in the QTH field. And in this case, for their QTH, I actually just put all the park numbers, and I like pipes to separate stuff. So I would log this in my personal log just like this. And this is, again, because this is a log for my own personal use, that's good enough. I talked to Mike once over the air. I have in my log that I talked to him at two parks. When I log into the POTA site as a hunter, I would see those as two unique entities, but to me that's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I don't particularly care. And even if you upload to QRZ or Logbook of the World, this is probably fine, because from the perspective of like paper chasing in those programs, Logbook of the World and things like that, those programs don't really care about this field. The concept of a park doesn't mean anything to Logbook of the World. for most of their awards and things like that. So for most of those other awards programs that aren't POTA, that you might be uploading logs for, they would look at this and see this as a duplicate contact. So they would only count one of them anyway towards, you know, whatever thing you're chasing in their system. Now, if you want, just so that your log matches up with what you would see in POTA, you could log 2 unique entities just like Mike did, but on the flip side, where basically in my hunter log, I'd have one contact with all of these details at one park and another contact with all of these details at the second park. You can also do it that way. And if you do that, then it would match up with what you see on the POTA site. So if you like to compare your logs back and forth and make sure that everything's tying out and that you're seeing the QSOs in POTA that you expect to see, this might be the way to do it then. It's really personal preference. And again, if you upload this to Logbook of the World, for example, Logbook of the World will let you upload duplicates all day long. So even though this looks like a duplicate contact to Logbook of the World, they'll let you upload it, but when you fill out their awards applications and things like that, it would make you kind of like pick which one is the matched one. So so really the answer to the second part of the question, if you're just at home hunting parks and just uploading to Logbook of the World, you know, you're not in a park yourself, it's not a park-to-park situation, really the answer is do it however you want that makes sense to you. So with that, I hope that answers the question. Some point down the road, if we want to talk about the complexities of park to park and how you can kind of have exponential piling if you're doing, you know, park to park where both people are in twofers or threefers, that's a whole separate rat hole that we could go down. But Derek's question is a good one for someone who's a hunter like me, just sitting in their home shack. So with that, thanks for giving me the opportunity to pop on and answer the question, and I'm glad to do it anytime.
And that is why I wanted him to answer that question, because he can do a way better job than I can. So thank you very much, Vance. Great question. Thanks for writing into us. And let us know if you have any more. Shoot me an email, k8mrd@icloud.com, and put Monday mailbag there in the subject. That way I will see it. So all right, guys, thanks so much for watching another episode of K8mrd Radio Stuff 73, guys.